All right, Mr. Red, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me, man. Red or Redemption, whatever you want, but it's short for Redemption. But yeah.
Is that like a pseudonym or is that like an actual name?
No, it's old school from MIRC chat, one of the old chat programs back in the day. It
Uh-huh.
just happened to be a handle when I was some like teenage punk, and I've just carried it on forever. I kind of use it as a gaming handle too. So
I was gonna say if that was actually your name, like Redemption, like that'd be the most badass name ever.
I know my son's name is Ace. That's a pretty cool name. I really love
That's a
that
cool
name.
one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the nicknames run in the family, I guess, huh?
Yep. There you go.
Anyways, tell me a little bit about your story, how you got into crypto, and what like really piqued your interest and drove you to want to be in this space, so my audience can get kind of an idea of like who you are.
Sure. I'm just like a normal guy who is very interested in crypto as a hobby. I think I heard about Bitcoin like years and years ago, but I thought like magic internet money was a ridiculous premise.
Hmm.
Until kind of about like 2017, I talked to my brother-in-law. And he was all about crypto, but he was talking about Ethereum and smart contracts, and just this whole idea of you could build like this self-sustaining entity on the internet. Um, and that's kind of how then I really understood the logistics of Bitcoin and how it worked. But to me, just more so Ethereum. I'm a gambling person, so for me, I was like, "Whoa! If you
Hmm.
could build a casino on Ethereum that's globalized, that no government can stop, and you could tokenize like ownership of that, like think how powerful like just that in itself could be, right? Like billions made just in Las Vegas. Put that on like the internet again with like no global borders, and you have like a unified currency in Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever it is, just how much money that could pull in, much lower fees for the user. And then again, the end user could be a token holder making a lot of dividends as a quote unquote owner of the casino, right? So to me, that really
Hmm.
sparked my interest. And then I really dove in during like the ICO craze. So there was just like so much going on. But to me, the first project I really invested in was like Token Card, because a Visa card that could spend this magic internet money and monetize it. Well, I was like, well, this is like really one of the cornerstones like that should be of crypto, right? So I was
Hmm.
so enthused about that, I actually started moderating in that channel and just kind of helping out as a volunteer. And I did that for like 3 years, complete volunteer basis. Like never got any tokens or anything like that. It was just like very passion driven, uh, kind of just into crypto, going all in. And then today, that just kind of the same thing carries over to Harvest. I just kind of stumbled upon their project because I liked yield farming and the returns that came out of like DeFi summer. Um, and so a yield aggregator, being able to save you money and just kind of the costs associated with gas and not having to chase farms. I found that very interesting, kind of like YFI. Um, and the same thing, kind of like Monolith. I just started helping out in the project, answering questions. And they said, "Hey, do you want to be a moderator? We need people to help kind of provide customer service." So again, like I'm just some guy who really passionate about crypto, and I really like use that passion to start helping other people. And then
Hmm.
that's ultimately why I'm here today, like speaking with you. I'm just like very passionate, like sharing my story. I like talking about harvest finance and crypto in general. Um, and so like not to jump too far ahead of ourselves, but like with a DAO or a commune like Harvest Finance, it really gives everybody the opportunity who wants to, talk about crypto or be more deeply involved in crypto other than just holding, not just depositing your money, but like depositing your talents, right? And I think I'm kind of like
Hmm.
an example of that. We have 10 other moderators, again, just people off the street in the community that kind of stepped up to be something more than just hanging out in a chat room, I guess I should put it.
Yeah, and that's good to have that kind of passion too in the space, because we're driving innovation, all of us in different ways, in blockchain and fintech. So it's good to have that passion so you can keep going in a space. It'll like you'll make it or break it. So it's important. And I think just to touch on like the online gambling, because I'm from Las Vegas.
Oh, okay,
So like
nice.
so when first started hearing about crypto and blockchain and stuff like that, like I think online gambling was like one of the very first use cases, where they were like showcasing what you could do with smart contracts. And that was really interesting to me. I spent a lot of time trying to break some of those gambling platforms because when it's ran by a computer and that's like when they say they're rolling the dice, like it's kind of like they're rolling the dice, but it's a little bit more predictable. Um, so I don't know. I found that stuff really, really interesting. But it seems like you've found a lot of different things that have pulled you into the space, huh?
Yeah, like for me particularly, I'm into sports betting. So for that
Mhm.
specific angle, because like kind of like you, I've always been wary of like this random number generator, and is this thing
Mhm.
really going to rob me if I bet on Red 27, right?
Sure.
So for me, but like with sports betting, I mean, billions in just like NFL alone, right? Um, and that's just a simple data feed, right? Can you get consensus from multiple data feeds in a decentralized manner that says, the Minnesota Vikings beat the Green Bay Packers, and what was the score and the spread?
Mhm.
So yeah, so like that form of it, I think can come a lot quicker or probably build a lot more trust with the general public, as opposed to yeah those random number generators, whether and you question whether they truly are random.
Yeah, the thing with the number generators, it's like I like really question it because like it's a quick little story. Like, because I used to play a lot on Tron Bet because it was a really easy platform to break for a while, where you like roll the dice and you have like a 95% win chance. So
Hmm.
you just set it really low and you just win over and over again. And then eventually when you lose, usually it like you lose like all your money. But like if you like double or nothing, what's the odds that you're gonna lose a second time with a 95% win chance?
Yeah, I know, right?
So if you have enough money and you can just keep doubling your money up to win it back every time you lose, every 5% chance to lose, you can keep making your money back. Problem is I tried doing that, and at some point I lost like 4 or 5 times in a row. And I was like, okay, this is definitely broken. There's not a, yeah, something's not right. So that's like, was the end of my online gambling. But I do like the sports betting one. I found that one pretty cool. I just haven't found like a good platform. Like, do you know of one?
Um, no, not one that I'm ready to vouch for yet because nobody's solved that data oracle problem, right? Everybody's solving like
Mhm.
off chain, or and they're manually solving bets. So that's still a very big part of centralization, right? Like a whale makes a massive bet, and they could shift to the end score, whatever, right? So,
Mhm.
um, the biggest thing is like I was following peer plays for a while because they were coming pretty close. But they were having a lot of problems with that consensus, right? A game would say, baseball game starts at 10:05, and then another feed says 10:07, and then another one says 10:12. None of those will find consensus, so the game can never start without manual intervention, and you don't want to have that, right? So um, I haven't seen anybody. There are some on Ethereum that have like a bunch of smart contracts, but again, they're settling scores manually. And for me, I want like the purest pure DeFi. So again, I don't really have a name for you other than like peer plays. Like just
Mhm.
thinking about what you were saying about random number generation, they were actually certified by one of the biggest companies in North America for random number generators. And I think they were the first in North America to receive that quote unquote certification on blockchain.
Mhm.
So they haven't really released a product yet. But for me, just kind of looking at that one specifically, like almost nobody's ever heard of them, but they've just been really grinding out a lot of these decentralized things. Like another one they were doing is it's called Sans, which they're on a graphene chain, but they figured out a decentralized bridge for Ethereum, Bitcoin, pretty much any currency, right? So not it's random
Mhm.
tangent to talk about their project and gambling, right?
Sure.
But yeah, that's just one of the ones that I'm following because again, I've spent so much money in Bovada, but so
Mhm.
in Bitcoin, but just such a hyper centralized system, and you have to wait for approvals to get your money out. And it's just It's really an ecosystem that could benefit from blockchain in terms of transparency, and nobody being able to cut you off when you've won too much, things like that. So I really think that's an industry that, even if Bitcoin itself doesn't take over the world, I think blockchain itself is very viable, and again, that industry in particular.
Yeah, I don't think blockchain's going away anytime soon. But like speaking of blockchains, have you spent most of your time like playing around and working on the Ethereum network, or have you explored other blockchains as, alternatives potentially?
It's mainly Ethereum. I've played, obviously Bitcoin, but I mean, it's like smart contract wise, it's just everything's on Ethereum. I think I've
Hmm.
tinkered around with Tron, like bets a little bit like you, but I'm
Yeah.
just so like, ugh, I think I threw like 25 bucks at that, and I'm just like, okay, this is too sketchy for me, right? So
Yeah.
I kind of stuck to like even gambling. ETH Horse was a kind of a fun little dinky app where you could bet like in like a 1 hour period who would have the better margin of gain, like Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? You couldn't necessarily rig the market on that. It was just simply looking at like coin market cap data. So it was fun just to throw like some tiny amount of ETH on that, and you could win like 3 times your money because it was all dependent on whether people were saying picking which pool was going to be the higher bet, and that was purely decentralized. So those kind of games, to me are like extremely fun and a great proof of concept. But ultimately, answer your question, it's all Ethereum for me because that's just where everything is.
Yeah, I know we're kind of going down a rabbit hole on online gambling here, but it's okay. Is there like regulation around it though? Like, because I know in the past they've been pretty stringent on like online gambling and stuff, but is that kind of like opening up a little bit more given the fact that like you can kind of do it anyways on blockchain and there's not a whole lot that can be done about it?
Well, I mean, it's always very territorial, right? So I think the
Hmm.
United States, everybody kind of thinks about in terms of like stringency in laws, specifically around gambling. I live in the States, so I know specifically it's been kind of goofy for a while, but ultimately there's been a lot of leniency on online gambling. And then in particular, basically sports gambling's kind of been delegalized. It's really down to
Hmm.
each individual of the 50 states. So a lot of the states are kind of ramping up. So there's not as much of like a stigma on gambling so much. And so that's kind of why I think you see like Bovada specifically accepting Bitcoin. Just so they can ultimately take users from all over the world, but then they're kind of recognizing blockchain and Bitcoin as something that's viable in the world today, right? So,
Hmm.
but like in terms of legality, that's the other kind of like weird thing about some of these blockchain projects like Tron betting or whatever. They're based out of Malaysia, where you kind of have some goofy laws. You don't really know what's going on. Again,
Hmm.
very centralized. If you're truly decentralized, the laws don't really matter, right? Like you're living on the internet, and there's no law like in the states that say you can't go interact with like a decentralized application, right? Like the laws I think actually specifically are on the banks saying they can't transmit money to gambling organizations that may be within the states. And I'm not a legal expert here, so don't quote me on this. But
Right.
ultimately, I think the legality is more on the banks and how they transmit money, not on the end user and how they're gambling, right? So, um,
Hmm.
so ultimately, it may be more for these projects who are starting out centralized that they have to worry about those laws. But I think, just like any of these currencies that maybe somebody's starting up and it's truly decentralized, once you kind of flip that switch, it's alive and hey, I'm not accountable anymore, right?
Yeah. It's such an interesting area though that like blockchain touches because it also kind of collides with like online gaming too in blockchain because it's eerily similar in a lot of ways. Like you're taking your magical internet money and you're putting it into some type of built software on the blockchain, whether it's gambling or gaming, and you don't know what's going to happen to it. There's algorithms behind everything, and there's mistakes made and human error. I just feel like some rules and laws get really blurred at this point when everything's like online. I don't know. It's really interesting to me.
You know what? You actually touched on something that's really interesting to me is I'm blown away that nobody's really tapped into the gamer space
Hmm.
where like all the gamers are like the younger gen, like us and younger, right? But and streamers, so why aren't they hyping Bitcoin and Ethereum as much? Why aren't they using that as like their main payment of portal?
Hmm.
Um, so to me that's really like a market that I think we can dominate in. And just thinking about like NFTs, right? Like NFTs are this big craze in Bitcoin, but it's like over, like a picture of a cat. But like to me, NFTs are going to be way more impactful. Like when you see like CS:GO skins for guns that are like $1,000, like,
Hmm.
but what if you could put that on the blockchain and then you could take that like more readily anywhere that you could go, or you could, go cross platform or whatever, right? Like to me, that's where way more money in NFTs could be, is when you finally bridge the gap between blockchain and gamers and kind of digitize all of these like loot boxes and things that you are, and put them on the blockchain so they're more
Hmm.
easily tradable between users.
Yeah, that's a whole nother rabbit hole, man.
Yeah, I
But
know. So we don't need to jump in that one along with gaming, right?
yeah, but we can touch it for a second though. I mean, I had Polyant Games on a month or so ago or 2 months ago on the podcast, and we kind of dove into it as well because they bought like one of the most expensive NFTs in terms of like gaming and stuff like that. It was like $800,000. It's like
Oof.
ridiculous. I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? But there seems to be like a really strong growing interest for creating like an NFT or a way to put like items in game or property in game or anything like that onto blockchain, because then you all of a sudden create this digital economy out of thin air,
Mhm.
and that opens up all kinds of opportunities, especially in gaming. So I imagine that it's going to come around pretty quickly. It might be like the next thing people touch on in terms of NFTs, because right now it's like all art and collectibles and things like that. But once they figure out there's utility applied to it, I think that's the real game changer.
Yeah, I think like Top Shots, just like as a random example, like baseball cards, like digitizing those. Um,
Hmm.
I liked comic books and baseball cards when I was younger, right?
Hmm.
But how many times did those get like ruined or bent or beat up or whatever?
Hmm.
So you can still instill like rarity, in a rookie card or whatever, right? With NFTs, while maintaining like its beauty, right? So
Hmm.
I definitely think like Top Shots and how popular it's become. Like you can call it quote unquote artwork, but I think it's actually like kind of like that first step into like bridging like collectibles and blockchain. And then, as you're saying, I think gaming is the next inevitable step.
Yeah, I think it's coming around the corner. Um, but yeah, let's pivot to harvest finance a little bit because I have a lot of questions about that. So, like, what is it exactly? And then I know it has to do a lot with yield farming. So maybe like an overview of like what yield farming is, since it's kind of brand new.
Sure. So I just gave actually like a presentation on yield farming at NYC Blockchain, and so I'm just going to try to super simplify this. But when
Hmm.
you have a decentralized application and there's no owner, that also means there may be no funding for it, right? So if you think like an exchange, you have USD in your hand, you walk into a normal bank, hey, I need some euros. They hand you some euros, you hand them the USD, you walk away. Well, that bank has a bunch of money sitting behind the counter because there's a bunch of like investors or owners of that, right? Well, in a
Hmm.
decentralized application, technically there is no owner. So in yield farming, these applications that come up, like let's say 1inch or Uniswap, in order to have liquidity as an exchange, they entice individual users like you and me to come and deposit your USD or deposit your euro and act as the bank by pooling everybody's money together, right? So if 1,000 people pool USDC together, we can now act as like a USDC exchange, like for that euro or whatever, right? And in return, 1inch or Uniswap give you back reward tokens for providing liquidity there. And so that's what yield farming is, like the intentional act of going around and putting liquidity at these various projects that hand out rewards for doing so. So you're farming
Hmm.
for rewards essentially. But it can kind of be expensive and dangerous to yield farm. Like almost every week, there's a brand new hack. in yield farming, where you'll see like 23 million, $25 million lost from Meerkat hack on Binance Smart Chain. Um, just one of the most random examples. So a yield farming aggregator like Harvest Finance, what it does is actually is able to look at the developers of Harvest Finance go out and look at the contractual code at each of these individual farms and help determine the safety of these farms, and then through like carpooling, everybody
Mhm.
pooling their money together, depositing. If you have $500, you can deposit with the guy that's depositing 1 million, and it all gets placed at these farms. It farms for rewards, sells the rewards for profit, and redeposits it back into your account, effectively compounding your original balance. So you deposit USDC, it maybe goes out and farms Uni token, it'll sell those Uni tokens for USDC, and now you started with 500, now maybe you're at 550. But your earning power is now grown because now you're earning on $550 instead of 500. So Harvest does like that automated compounding for you. And
Mhm.
because you're carpooling with other users, it's the cost is shared. So like when you have these really high gas events on Ethereum and it costs you like $50 to do a transaction, to do compounding, it actually takes 6 intensive gas steps on Ethereum. So it could cost you like $300 to perform compounding. Well, to make $300 in rewards, you probably have to deposit like over $50,000 depending on the APY of the farm. So that makes yield farming and compounding almost very inaccessible to the small depositor. But with Harvest Finance, by everybody being able to carpool their money together, it's now fractions of a penny per user as opposed to
Mhm.
$300 to perform compounding. And if you look at like APR versus APY, like compounding versus non-compounding, the growth is exponential versus linear. So it's very important in yield farming, and you'll see every farm in yield farming basically quote their percentage in APY, but it's almost misleading to look at those numbers because again the most users can afford to compound, right? So
Mhm.
that's what Harvest Finance is. Essentially we're a yield aggregator that automates the entire process of farming while also only deploying strategies that are known to be safe, so you don't get kind of trapped in what's known as a rug pool. Basically, like either the administrators or a hacker finds a backdoor in the code where they can steal everybody's money.
Okay. So is it kind of similar to like Ethereum mining pools back in the day where you have like one centralized place where it like kind of cuts out all the issues and you just kind of direct towards them and it handles like all the fees and everything? Kind of like a similar scenario.
Yeah, I mean, just in the sense that you're joining up with other like-minded individuals who want to mine for Ethereum. So you all pool your money together instead of you just mining with your, one little tiny hash power or whatever. You can
Hmm.
pool together and form, one giant pool of hash power. At Harvest Finance, it's deposit your $500 USDC. You're pooled together with $200 million worth of deposits of USDC, and now your earning power is much stronger at whatever farm that money's pointed at.
What kind of yields are you guys getting? Is it like the yields based on like the token and stuff like that, or do you have like an APY for Harvest Finance or someone that's joining in?
So it's kind of like split. So
Hmm.
depending on what you deposit, if you go to the front page of harvest.finance, there's over 45 different strategies that you can deposit in. So like you
Hmm.
can deposit just simple USDC or USDT, which is earning 30% on a just simple digital dollar. So if you think it like a fiat bank that pays you 1% on your dollar, you can make 30% at Harvest Finance on your digital dollar. Just very simple, straightforward deposit. Or you can do complicated things like sushi LP deposits, or like 1inch is one of the newer ones we have where you can deposit a 1inch combination with Ethereum, and those are earning like 150% APY. But it's a little bit more of a complex strategy. You need moderate to advanced kind of user knowledge how to jump into those pools. Um, and in addition to that, or what's kind of included in those APYs, is our reward token, which is farm. When you deposit and stake farm, you start receiving 30% of all profits generated by those 45 plus strategies on Harvest Finance. So, like right now,
Mhm.
we float between like $5 to $7 million a month generated in profits at Harvest Finance. That means 30% of that flows to everybody who's staked in the farm profit share. Right. So, in
Mhm.
addition to making money on, say, that USDC that you deposited, you're also earning some bonus tokens, which are then makes you now like participating in like a revenue share of the entire platform.
I want to buy some farm. Where's farm at?
Farm's cool because we try to be, along the decentralized lines. We're a commune,
Mhm.
so we really point to places like Uniswap is where the majority of our liquidity is, and then we
Mhm.
also have a proposal right now engaging with Sushi Swap about how we can kind of potentially collaborate and think about moving our liquidity pools over to Sushi Swap.
Okay. So, like, taking a step back and looking at like Ethereum mining as an example, like in the past, people used to do that to create almost like a daily income in some situations. And then other situations, they just hold it long term as an investment. So, like, with like yield farming, is it what's the main goal? Is it to generate a type of like daily passive income, or is it to create something that just compounds and that creates a long-term investment? Like, what's the general idea that most people have with yield farming?
So there's like two different approaches to it ultimately, and it's on what you're depositing, right? So
Mhm.
some users, like again, you have a digital dollar, and I don't want to sit in Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever it is that has these wild fluctuations, right? Because even if I'm
Mhm.
making 30%, well, what if the market swings 45%, right, in the wrong direction? It just wipes out
Mhm.
like all of your gains. So I think that's kind of like maybe what makes mainstream investors a little weary. But what if you could say, no, here's a digital dollar that's stable, and then you'll earn your 30%? Well, then maybe that's kind of what's going to bring in your mainstream investor and say, okay, yeah, I want passive income or I want like a stable type of income. Well, then we have other strategies, which we call like our Chad degen, quote unquote, strategies, um, where you're putting in these very volatile assets mixed in an LP token, but they may get you 1,000% APY. But because the token itself is very volatile, that APY may be offset to where it's only like 10% because of just randomly the swing in the token. So there is some speculatory nature in some of these strategies that we're doing for people who just want to think if they can do a cash grab quick buck. And then we have some very like serious, straightforward, passive type investments, or not investments, but strategies where you can deposit and say, I'm pretty confident I'm going to be making this 15 to 30% APY, and that's 15 times anything I could ever get out of the fiat banking system.
Yeah, I imagine if I've put down quite a lot in terms of like just buying a few different tokens that produce like a decent yield. But like I still don't like get a whole lot. Like, is it more beneficial to do it through through like Harvest Finance versus doing it completely on your own? Like, is there just more benefit to doing it that way?
Yeah, because even though there's like a 30% rake, if you deposit USDC and it earns you $1,000,
Hmm.
there's going to be a 300%, or not 300, $300 cut taken off of that. So your net's going to be 700. But ultimately, what I pointed out was anytime you actually try to perform your compounding, it's going to cost you $300 as an individual user to compound. So you've completely wiped out your profit just trying to achieve true APY. Harvest can compound once or twice, like every other day, and it's going to cost you fractions of a penny. So no matter how much you deposit in a Harvest Finance, you can pretty much achieve that compounding effect with fractions of a cost that you
Hmm.
can't do as a solo farm right now, just with because of again Ethereum activities and the costs on Ethereum.
Right. Okay. What's your role there? Is it just moderator, or is it like farm master general, or?
So I was actually like recently just given the title of like foreman I'm just like project manager kind of a sense. I'm help organize the other mods, make sure we're
Mhm.
kind of like all on task in a sense, because I don't I think what people don't understand about a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, it's, you flip on this switch and there's this code that's running, and then a DAO is like when you can vote, and then things will happen because I voted about them. But there's still like, with a $500 million business that Harvest is, the developers spend all their time coding, chasing strategies and making sure we're putting out the most cutting edge things possible, updating the website, cracking out bugs, security. There's just a million things you have to do in developing alone.
Mhm.
But who's doing the customer service? Who's writing the intro guides? Who's doing the podcast, the marketing,
Mhm.
like the million other things that you actually have to do to run a business, right? So the developing is like, 80% and the most critical and kind of what everybody sees. But community, and that's why, crypto is so unique, and why community plays such a big role, is because you need people from the community to kind of step up and do that. So as I was kind of talking about earlier, I serve in that role with like 10 other people. And then just me as like the foreman, I'm kind of just helping us kind of
Mhm.
keep in task. I consider myself on the same level as everybody else that's serving. We just kind of need somebody to make sure that the wheels keep on spinning while the developers have their head down grinding it out.
Right, and that makes sense. That's pretty cool. Um, what's the level of safety in terms of like DAOs nowadays? Because there was that one DAO on Ethereum years ago that got hacked. Like,
Hmm.
is it like much like better now, or is it more secure? Like, because I'm sure some people would have a little bit of reservation in terms of putting their money into a DAO.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a very general term when you say DAO, right? And as I mentioned before,
Mhm.
there's like a hack every week in this yield farming, whether it's there was bad code or it was just like malicious intent by the developer in the first place, right?
Yeah,
So it's hard to answer that question directly. What I will say is things like feel a lot safer because there's a lot more quality projects out there, right? Like what the one that
hmm,
you mentioned, you're like the original DAO, and you're talking about like 5 years ago or whatever it is, and nobody was like really truly building on the juggernaut that Ethereum is today. Way more checks and balances, way more like auditors, trail of bits, and least authority, and just all these good quality like synergistic effects building up when you have so many good developers coming to the space and really trying to build an awesome system like DeFi. So I think, yeah, like ultimately the answer is yes, things are much safer, but at the same time it's still like the American Wild West. You have to be careful
sure.
what you're doing, right? Like things are safe, like there's money to be made. You're on the cutting edge of technology, but there's still a lot of snake oil salesmen, and like you can get robbed overnight. So just have to
Sure.
be very wary.
So it mostly comes down to like the developers maintaining it and not running into too many bugs or a really bad bug, I guess, at that point. So it's mostly like a developer type thing.
Well, yeah, there, because the thing is though, it depends on your interactivity with other systems too, right? Like your
Hmm.
code could be perfect, but then there's this whole concept of money Legos where these systems interconnect and then create that synergy, right? So like Harvest
Hmm.
interconnecting with a Curve Finance because we're farming their token. Well, when you connect two things, right? Like sometimes when you mix two chemicals, you may have an unexpected reaction, right? And so both of you may have your programming perfect, but then as soon as you interconnect, something just may not translate properly. And then that's when a hacker can do like a flash loan, or it doesn't even have to be a hack. They just find
Hmm.
a way to manipulate the system where they can use like the mechanisms in DeFi to steal your money, right? So it doesn't even have to be
Hmm.
like a quote unquote hack. It can just be a miscommunication between how the two systems are interacting.
I always found DAOs like really interesting. Like besides that, the terrible hack that happened years ago. I mean, the whole concept of what you can do with a DAO as a decentralized autonomous organization, it just is really cool to me. Are there other like examples of or use cases of DAOs in Ethereum that are really popular right now, other than in just yield farming that you're knowledgeable about?
Yeah, I mean, you know, yield farming is definitely just one example. I mean, there's
Hmm.
almost every project, in a sense, if they're truly trying to be DeFi, you have to be a DAO, because if you're decentralized, there's nobody in control, right? So you have to
Uh-huh.
have like kind of like this mechanism where, something breaks, or if the platform needs an upgrade, these token holders have to vote and say, yes, we want this implementation to occur, right? So yeah, definitely. Like another project they work for, AP Wine. They're starting up AP Wine Finance. They're starting up like a tokenized futures on yields, right? So, like if the farm token is doing 60% APY, or if your digital dollar is doing 30% APY, what if you could borrow against that 30%, right? Because you know that 30% is stable.
Hmm.
If I'm going to put $1,000 in there, that means it's going to return me $300 for a year. What if I could tokenize that theoretical $300, maybe sell to somebody for 200 as like a hedge against my money, so I could have like a payday advance today,
Hmm.
right? Um, and then whoever bought that theoretical yield for me now potentially made $100 if that 30% maintains on that $1,000, right? So within that, they have a whole governance mechanism, because what are the trading fees to generate those tokens, and then to trade one, and then to redeem your yield? So things like that, or like at Uniswap, the same principle. There's fees for when you create a liquidity pool. So can you, where are those fees going? Even going back to like our original conversation about like casinos, right? A
Hmm.
DAO would vote in how much fees should we charge the customer. Is 2% too much? Maybe we should drop it down to 1% to be competitive with everybody. But again, there's no centralized guy in a suit that says, okay, let's change it. People have to vote on those mechanisms in a decentralized system. So yeah, like not just Harvest Finance, pretty much every project that is in this decentralized ecosystem has some kind of DAO concept built into it.
Okay. So like is Uniswap like a kind of like a DAO, or Dex is like something completely different? It's hard to like maintain like an idea of all these different terms.
Yeah, anachronism. A DEX just means decentralized exchange. So yeah,
Hmm.
they're definitely gonna have some kind of governance system to it, but every single project is different, because not very few have actually achieved like full pure DAO status, where 100% of like all decisions are perfectly controlled. Because ultimately you can have manipulation in this. Like one guy who owns 10% of the token supply vote is
Hmm.
going to drastically change any kind of voting scale that occurs, right? And who says that's not an owner of the platform herself, who just bought up all the tokens when they were cheap, right? Um, so, like again, it's just very case by case. You really have to look at each individual project and say, like, what does this token represent? What can I do with like this governance and voting power? Are they really a DAO, or are they just kind of like pretending to be with some like smoke and mirrors mechanisms?
Okay, got it. Let's let's go into some theory real quick. Do you think that, DAOs and DEXs and DeFi and everything that's, cropping up, that's like really driving all this attention towards Ethereum, given Ethereum's, issues with being able to kind of scale quickly, and fees and like gas fees and stuff like that, do you think Ethereum is like still going to be the place where a majority of people are going to build this stuff out, going into the future long term? Or do you think some of that market share is going to go elsewhere? Because there's other blockchains that are pretty damn good at this point that have solved some of those issues. But I mean, it's kind of like, will like Ethereum 2.0 like become everything everyone hopes it will? Will it not? It seems like it's kind of like teetering right now. And it's kind of really interesting to watch certain projects kind of debate where they want their future to be. I guess just in your opinion, since you're kind of in the space, do you think it'll Ethereum will kind of dominate that for the near future, or do you think it'll shift?
Yeah, I definitely think it's kind of the snowball's rolling downhill, and it's already gotten so much momentum and mass.
Hmm.
It's going to be kind of hard to, you know, derail what's going on in Ethereum, right? So,
Hmm.
sure, you're always going to have like challengers coming up and saying, "Oh, we have all the fastest transaction speeds," but let's talk about like Binance Smart Chain, right? Oh, everybody's, you know, the big media thing is all these farms are popping up on Binance Smart Chain so much faster. Transaction costs are nil. People start yield farming over there, and a rug pull occurred. Now, whether good or bad, Binance was able to step in and supposedly shut down all the bridges back to Ethereum, so the people that stole the money couldn't get away with it, right?
Hmm.
But that's a completely centralized move. They halted all the bridges. They basically effectively stopped the chain. What's the point of blockchain then if somebody could stop it? What if somebody stopped Bitcoin today? Like that, the world would freak out. It would basically be worthless because you basically circumvented the whole point of it being
Hmm.
decentralized, right? So you have this whole media narrative that there's so many things that are coming to challenge Ethereum, nobody's really done it yet, right? Like they're doing it with like all these smoke and mirrors, like you typically do in the headlines of media. But the reality is, everybody's still building on Ethereum, and there really isn't like this mass exodus that everybody's claiming. They're just showing you
Hmm.
like, hey, here's the 5 or 10 projects that have popped up on my new faster chain. Well, Ethereum has like 1,000 DApps and growing, right? So to me, I think it's more of just like hyperbole than anything else.
Hmm. True, true. Well, I mean, my first investment ever was Ethereum, so I'm kind of like on that
Me
train, but
too.
like
Yeah, me too.
hopefully it can keep getting better because it is really annoying when I try to sell an NFT for $70 and my gas
Oh
fee is
gosh,
$70. I'm just like, come on.
dude, have you tried Art Blocks yet?
No, is it any better?
Oh no. Okay. Well, Art Blocks is really cool. It's generative art. So Art
Hmm.
Blocks IO. Um, how do I explain this? Have you ever played like a game like No Man's Sky?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know it's like procedurally generated. This is
Hmm.
kind of like the same concept, generated art, where like the artist program certain parameters, and then they hit go, and
Hmm.
then every time you mint, and so it costs like zero point 0.1 to mint, it's telling the algorithm to go, and it generates your NFT randomly based on that algorithm. So you could have something crazy
Hmm.
and unique that nobody else is going to have. And so that's what Art Block IO is. They're working like with these really talented artists that come up with all these different parameters for generative art. And some of them are just really amazing. But to go back to your comment, like the art will be
Hmm.
zero point 0.1 to generate, but the gas fees are so high, it's like zero point 0.3 in gas. So it's 3 times more in gas than the art piece itself is to generate.
It was called artblock.io.
Artblocks.io with an
Art
S.
blocks with an
Yeah.
S.
It's
I'm
really
gonna.
cool. Some of the art that generates is just amazing. Like if you go into the curated
Hmm.
section, it's kind of like the top of the line.
Hmm.
Some of them are just amazing. Look at like archetypes. That's the kind of one I just sit and stare at. It's like this rectangles kind of deal, but it's just amazing. Some of those pieces on there are awesome.
Have you ever played with like the AI generated art? Like that stuff is mind blowing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of like along the same lines too.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the stuff like in NFTs that's
Hmm.
really like interesting to me, as opposed to like, and not to knock on artists. There's some really
Sure.
cool stuff out there. My brother-in-law is definitely into the NFT art and stuff, and like,
Hmm.
and art is very eye of the beholder, right? But to
It's
me, just
subjective.
like yeah, subjective. Exactly. That's what we were looking for. But like to me, I love like the AI generated like randomization that like nobody will ever see or be able to like create again, as
Hmm.
opposed to like somebody taking like a picture of a tiger and like making it weird colors and blurring it, right, and like adding some artistic effect. Like some
Hmm.
people love that kind of stuff, like, but to me, I love the AI procedural kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's all different types of art out there, so it's no different than saying, "Oh, I like one type of art versus another type." So I don't know. I find AI generated art like super, super cool. It's amazing what a computer can do nowadays. There's
Yeah.
some that you can. Most of them are free online too. Like there's a few that like I can like take a picture of something and then like just give it the photo and like say have fun, and then like 5 minutes later, I got this like beautiful masterpiece made out of my photo. I'm like, oh my god.
That's
There's an
amazing.
NFT right there.
Nice.
um, anyways, I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. We covered so much damn shit. But awesome. So, Red, thanks for coming on the podcast and explaining a little bit more about what Harvest Finance is. And I like the shirt too.
Oh,
I
thank
I see it. Don't worry,
you.
it's going to be in the video.
Nice. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I actually I custom made this myself. It just, that's how like YOLO I am. I think I made this like week 2. I was just like, I need some Harvest Finance merch. I love sitting here and just talking about Harvest Finance
Well,
merch.
I want some too. I love getting crypto merch. How can I get a Harvest Finance shirt?
I'm gonna send you one then, man. I'll get you one.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Well, I'll
yeah,
be back in the States, so I'll message you, I guess, and figure it out.
nice,
Um,
nice.
but yeah, thanks for coming on and really explaining what yield farming is because I keep getting those questions all the time and like I can't like fully answer it because it's just so new. And no, we covered DAOs and DeFi and online gambling and you name it. I think we touched everything. So thanks for
Yeah,
coming on and having a
I
conversation.
appreciate you having me, man. Like, yeah, and I want to invite everybody out there, harvest.finance. Come check us out. We kind of try to be like a one-click solution for all users, super friendly community. And we love feedback. Like if you're a dev or if you're like an artist, we take artwork. We have a marketing contest where we want people to make videos and art and memes. And we pay like $1,500 to first place, I think, in that
Okay.
upcoming
Oh, cool.
marketing contest. So like I think I kind of mentioned it before. Somebody came up with a tagline: "We don't want you just to deposit your money. We want you to deposit your talents too." Like that's how what a DAO and a commune is all about. So definitely want to invite everybody out to come visit.
Yeah, do you guys have social media or do you guys active through like Discord or like another
Oh yeah,
medium?
man, we're huge. Discord, we have a massive community, active
Okay.
24/7. That's where our main hub is at. We definitely have a Twitter that's very active, a Reddit page. So yeah, we have all that stuff. But the Discord, come to harvest.finance and you'll see a link to the Discord on the right side of the webpage. And like I said, our community is bustling. It's really cool.
Yeah, sounds awesome, man. All right, I'll let you go. Thanks for taking the time and really appreciate it.